Early Wednesday morning, this was about 2 a.m. Moscow time, a Kremlin building was hit by 2 aerial drones, and we actually have footage of the drone hitting one of the Kremlin buildings. This is from Wednesday in the wee hours of the morning. Oh! That was my sound effect added, but that is actual real footage.
That wasn't the CIA, said it?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, new evidence has emerged that Andrew Dice Clay is responsible for it, as you can see. Oh! Wasn't very subtle about that. No, but that was actually real footage with my sound added. But the whole thing's not a joke. That was actually real video. Now, the Kremlin has said no one was injured or killed. They added in their statement, "We view these actions as a planned terrorist attack and an assassination attempt." And they also said, undoubtedly, such decisions, the definition of goals, the definition of means, all of this is dictated to Kiev from Washington. So they are not only accusing the Ukrainians of doing this, they are obviously saying pretty plainly that they think that we had a hand in it as well. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky denied Ukrainian involvement. He insisted, quote, "We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory." Now, as a sort of retaliation, as a countermeasure, Kiev was attacked shortly after these drones hit the Kremlin. And today, Zelensky made a surprise trip to The Hague, where he delivered a speech entitled "No Peace Without Justice for Ukraine." And in it, he called for the International Criminal Court to bring Putin to justice for his crimes against his country. We'll hear.
Well, that's realistic.
Well, this is, this is what we're going to get into. Let me just play the last moment of this.
Of course, we all want to see different Vladimir here in The Hague.
That joke kind of fell flat, but he made clear we want to see a different Vladimir here in The Hague.
Sentenced for these criminal actions right here in the capital of the international law. And I'm sure we will see that happen when we win. And we will win. And
after we capture Moose and Squirrel.
Battlefield, not just against this aggression.
This guy, he's like a Mad TV version of Borat. Like if Mad TV casts their own Borat, like the kind of inferior knockoff comedy version of Borat, that's what he strikes me as. There's nothing to play there, really, just a soundbite. Obviously, we wish a different Vladimir were here. Okay, so look, Russia saying Ukraine did it, Ukraine saying they didn't do it. Obviously, the United States denies we had any hand in it or that Ukraine did it. We're calling this a false flag. You know what? I would even say, look, whatever the truth of this is, I don't think it's beyond the Russians to make a false claim that they could then use as justification to ramp up their actions in Kiev. But whatever it is, this is clearly a dramatic escalation.
My question would be, do they really need an excuse? I mean, they're already
Well, that's the thing. That was what I was going to get to.
Why would they need that? Right. Why?
Right. It's like the war is already very, very popular inside Russia. And so I don't think they would need or want an excuse. So that complicates that narrative. At the end of the day, I don't think it's really possible to know one way or another. However, the real big takeaway here is not only that this is a dramatic sort of escalation, but that now it seems undeniable to any party that regime change in Russia is the goal. And that's always been something that no one wanted to admit. No, we're not trying to take Putin out of power. No. Right. We just want him to back off Ukraine. Well, now it seems impossible to make that argument. Right. Whether the drone was a Ukrainian drone or not, the fact that, he is now calling for, and obviously, yes, they issued the arrest warrants. Okay, fine. But now you have Zelensky himself going and saying, yeah, we want to see him tried here. this is very clearly a shifting of the goalposts. Now Ukraine's talking about they want Crimea back, and now they are making pretty open calls for regime change in Russia, which is not just so this is not just an escalation of violence. This is an escalation of aims. And Greenwald made a good point about this last night. He said, in the 1950s, a nuclear threat actually registered with people as a threat. We had duck and cover drills. Like, people were actually afraid of this. This wasn't just an abstraction. Whereas now it is. And now it seems like, we're just going to sleepwalk into this.
Right. Well, and that's partly because we do not have a free press doing its job, relating back to the previous segment. Speaking of Greenwald, he did a segment where Psaki, who's now working for MSNBC, and Simone Sanders, who's also now working for MSNBC, had a delightful chat in which Psaki talked about what great partners the press had been.
Yes, I saw that.
When she was in the White House, they were partners. Like, what kind of a press would a press secretary feel had been good partners with the administration? That's not their job to be partners. It's their job to be antagonists. So this is part of it. Look, government's gonna government, and certainly the arms manufacturers aren't going to tell you the truth. It's the job of the press to be ringing the alarms and saying, hey, this is extremely dangerous situation. World War III could erupt. And is this something we really want to do? And besides that, they could be giving some coverage to Cy Hirsch's report about $400 million disappearing into the most corrupt country in Europe. And I believe it was CBS that actually tried to do something about, it tried to do a segment about weapons getting sold on the black market, and it got pulled. It got pulled off the air. Our people will know. Tell us in the chat. I think it was CBS.
Well, the segment we did on this, which included the Cy Hirsch piece, but also just included footage of these sort of, private investment people just going up on stage and saying, hey, there's a lot of money to be made in the reconstruction of Ukraine. I mean, we're doling out contracts to BlackRock, one of the executives at Citigroup was at that meeting. Like, we are talking about the kind of investments, meaning contracts for these corporations, that probably amount to sums of money that are probably larger than the Ukrainian GDP before the war. Like, we're talking about building up. We're not just building up Ukraine again. We are building, as Dmitry Olenik, I think his last name was, we're talking about building up a completely different country. We're talking about just like building up a sort of Disneyfied Ukraine. And so, like, the money that whatever Zelensky was like skimming, I mean, that's obviously a scandal if it's true, but that's nothing. That ain't even the tip of the iceberg.
Hello,
compared
kids.
To the kind of money
Welcome to mail order bride land.
You're right, exactly. But that's small potatoes. That's nothing compared to the money they're going to be giving out to Western and American corporations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, this is why the whole moral posturing is so fucking sickening. We know that Boris Johnson went to Ukraine, proposed peace. Zelensky was ready to go along. Putin was ready to listen, and he was told, no peace. We're not going to make peace because this is the big game of risk we decided to play with the lives of everybody on the planet. Our arms manufacturers are making a lot of money. We know history. We know rise, level off, fall. We're trying to maintain our hegemony by draining a strategic rival. It's, of course, backfiring with the predictable de-dollarization. Savvy actually just did something on that. And it's bringing China and Russia closer. They historically have a lot of suspicion and antagonism towards each other, but now you've made them set that aside, and you've brought them together in a block against us. And And when you talk about the Ukrainian lives being lost, it's just disgusting because these people could give a fuck about Ukrainian lives. They're using Ukrainian lives as cannon fodder
Of course, yeah.
in this game of realpolitik that they're playing badly, I might add.
Please clap.